Thanks again for coming this morning. Half of you know him at least, maybe all of you know him, but we'll turn it over to Zachary.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. For those who don't know me, my name is Zachary Tremble, and my grandfather does go here, so that's how I got this lucky opportunity to preach to you all. And I'd like to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to talk to you this morning, because it gives me the valuable experience I need to continue and what I want to do for the future. A little bit about me is I am currently a senior at Lincoln Christian University. I will graduate in December later this year with a degree in preaching ministry. And I also, this summer, will be going on an internship to Harvester Christian Church in St. Charles, Missouri, so I'm super excited about that, to work at a church like that. I grew up, of course, in Newton, Illinois, on my family farm, so Lincoln was a big change for me, even though it's not super big. It's about 15,000 people, but it was a shell shock for me to move there. And I get made fun of it all the time because most of my friends are from Peoria. So they say, well, this is small. And I was like, it kind of is big to me. And so I get tossed about that all the time. But I make fun of them for not knowing what corn is. So I'm here to talk to you about fear. Fear is something that I think controls us too much in this world today. If you have your Bibles, Genesis chapter 50 is where I'll be preaching out of, verse 15. This story has a lot of significance, I think, because of course, it's the last chapter in the book of Genesis, but also it has a lot with how fear can control people. And also it has other subplots, I would say, having forgiveness and having, being willing to forgive and all that. I'll start with verse 15. It says, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? They're already worried that because Jacob, our father, is dead, that Joseph is probably going to hold a grudge. Now, if we remember, a few chapters ago, Joseph had already forgiven them of their sins. Because, what was wrong, they intended for good. And they were fearing for their lives from Joseph. That reminds me of a story. It was about 6 or 7 years ago. I remember because it was right before I started high school, and I had a blatant fear that always bothered me, and it was a fear of roller coasters. And I just always looked at them and I'm like, that's a death machine. I could die. That's how I always thought about it. But I always wanted to ride one. I never had the guts to ride a roller coaster because, well, I always thought too much about it is what I was told. You're thinking too much about it. You worry too much about it breaking down and something happening than you do actually riding it. And I was like, well, that's kind of true. And I was upset because my 8th grade field trip, or like the 8th graders, they got to do a special trip. They went to Six Flags, and I did absolutely nothing for 6 hours. I walked around the park because the majority of that place is roller coasters, and I did nothing, and I was bored out of my mind. So we went to Holiday World with my cousin Levi back there and a few others of us that went. And I remember him telling me, we're going to ride the Raven, of course. And I was like, I don't think so. That's probably not a good option. And I remember him just dragging me on there anyway. And I got on it and actually enjoyed it. And I was like, we rode it like, there wasn't very many people in the park that day for some reason. So we had ridden it multiple times, and I was like, I'm getting pretty good at this. Just riding the Raven, which is the easiest of the three, I believe. I think, well, I guess there's 4 now. But, and then Levi looks at me and he says, you know which one's next, right? And I said, we're not doing that one. He goes, yes, we are, because we're already walking that way and we're going to ride the voyage. Like, no. Because that fear began to creep back in me. I was like, this could go wrong. This could go so wrong, it goes fast, and who knows what could happen, and you could fall out of your, all that thing that kept me from going on in the first place. And we get in line anyway, and I'm like, I'm kind of just doing that. I'm like, well, maybe I should go, and then I have to use the bathroom kind of stuff. He's like, no, none of that, you're going. So I'm like, okay, so we get in the line, and you're waiting, and he goes, there's nobody waiting up front. I said, what? He goes, we're going to go to the very front of the roller coaster. I said, no, we're not. But he pushes me, and he gets me up there. We're sitting in the very front of the roller coaster, and I'm like, you get buckled in, I'm just like, shaking, and I was stiff, and then as you go up the first incline, I was like, okay, maybe I can handle this. And he's telling me, whatever you do, don't look down when you go down the first loop. He goes, just look out, because you can see the entire park from up on the top of the roller coaster. And I was like, okay. And so, if you've ever rode the Voyage, it stops right before it gets up to the top, and you can look out. And me, in all my infinite wisdom, decided to look down. And as we went down, I said to him, I hate you. And I don't remember. I probably did. I probably screamed. I don't know. But it was something I had to, control myself. And then when I got done, I was like, that wasn't too bad. Let's try it again. And then I remember, because my parents knew I absolutely hated roller coasters, I said, they'll never believe me if I rode the Voyage, so I had to buy a picture, and then I got in trouble for buying a picture. But I was able to overcome that fear of riding roller coasters, which is probably not at the same expense as, Joseph's brother thinking they're going to get killed. But for the purpose of this sermon, I want to make it seem like it is, because I really thought I might die, and that's how I felt. And now I just love roller coasters. But in this story, a lot of people will tend to see that. Let's look at Joseph and what he does. But in this story, I want us to focus on the brothers, because I think we have a lot more to relate to them than we do to Joseph. Because Joseph has had this, he was an arrogant child, he got everything he wanted from his father, and he's went through all the cycles, and now it's his brother's turn. But of course, they've been through so much as well. Because, as I said in verse 15, they were already thinking, he holds a grudge against us. What causes that fear that they had? I want to keep on reading. Verse 16. So they sent word to Joseph, saying, your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers, the sins of your brothers, and the wrongs that they have committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. When their message came to him, Jesus wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are your slaves, they said. That looks familiar too, doesn't it? Throwing themselves to Joseph, bowing. Of course they didn't know him, but a similar circumstance a few chapters beforehand. But the fear, they made a note from Jacob to saying, you need to forgive them. And it made Joseph himself. I'm going to translate this to another story in the New Testament. Luke 22 is where this is found. Because I see a lot of similarities between the brothers' fear and Peter's own fear when he denied Jesus. So if you read with me in Luke 22, it says, "And seizing him, they led him away, and they took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance. But when they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard, they had sat down together. Peter sat down with them. The servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked at him closely and said, 'This is the man that was with him.' But he denied it. 'Woman, I don't know him,' he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, 'You are also one of them.' 'Man, I am not,' Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, 'Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean.' Peter replied, 'Man, I don't know what you're talking about.' Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered what the word the Lord had spoken to him. 'Before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times.' He then went outside and wept bitterly." I look at that last phrase, he wept, the fear that Peter had. Because you remember when Jesus talked to Peter, he goes, "I will not deny you, Lord." He was so certain of himself. And then when he actually did it, he wept. Fearful because he had done the very thing that he said he wouldn't. You know, the fear of getting in trouble, the fear of what's going to happen next to him, to Peter, to Jacob, Joseph's brothers, excuse me. It also reminds me of another thing, another life event. So on the farm, my dad had a combine. He would sit it out back. It was a junk combine he used for parts. And my mom absolutely hated it being back there. She did. Just because it was there. But I remember I was about 11 or 12 years old, and I got a BB gun for my birthday. And I was super excited about this. I was like, I get to shoot this BB gun. And all the kids in school had a BB gun because that was your mark, That was what made you, high and mighty in the farm world, and the kids, and your 6th grade classmates or whatever. And I was like ready to go and everything. And I would take this. I would come back from school every day, and I would march around, basically just marching around like I was a soldier or something. And I would shoot things, whatever I could shoot at. And my dad was like, "Well, if you're going to shoot anything, shoot at the birds because they're a nuisance." So I was like, "Got it, done. Boom, I'm going to kill some birds because that's what I want to do." And I would keep shooting these birds, and they wouldn't die. And I was so angry all the time. I was like, I want to kill some birds because I want to see if this BB gun is actually powerful enough. And it never did. It never worked. And some people said, "Well, your sights are bad, or you're just a bad shot." I was like, that's not it. My gun's just not powerful enough to kill a bird. I said, I need a better BB gun. Of course, then, you can't sit there and complain to your parents because then you're like, you get to talk to her or whatever. But I remember, I was like, I'm going to test the power of this BB gun. So that combine sat there. And I was like, I bet my BB gun's not even powerful enough to shoot the glass out of this combine. So I pumped it up as much as I could, and I got about, I don't know, probably from here to that back TV from it. And I shot it, and I was like, and I ran away, threw it back in the closet, and sat in my room, and was crouching and something. I don't know. I was afraid. I was afraid out of my mind because I had shot this. I was like, Dad's gonna find out, and he's going to he's going to spank me because I broke the combine. And I don't know why, but, it was a combine we never used anyway. But, just that fear, the fear of getting in trouble from your parents. Yes, because even though the combine was never used, it was just sitting back there. I still had this ultimate fear of getting in trouble because I had shot the window out of the combine. And if we see that with Joseph's brothers, the fear of getting in trouble and the fear of coming back. So then again, look at verse 19. So as we look, Joseph's brothers, they've made a note to Jacob, to Joseph, saying, you need to forgive your brothers. Joseph wept, and the brothers were fearful. But look at, and they have thrown themselves in front of Joseph, pleading for their lives. We are your slaves. But Joseph's response is what's key in this passage. But verse 19. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. That feeling of relief. Have you ever felt that feeling of relief when you were kids or currently kids? That feeling of relief when your parents said you're not actually in trouble. That's a pretty good feeling. It's like when you do something wrong, but you're like, please don't, and then they're like, you get away with this one time, That feeling of assurance and belief that Joseph is telling his brothers, saying, what you intended for harm. So them throwing him in a well, selling him into slavery, that ended up turning into Joseph being the head of the slaves, to having to deny Potiphar's wife, to him being thrown in jail, to him interpreting the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker, and then them being released from prison, and then the cupbearer forgetting about Joseph, and then remembering when Pharaoh had his dreams, to then Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dreams. Pharaoh saying, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about, let's make him second in the country. All of that, from him being pushed and sold into slavery, to him being second in command in the whole of Egypt. What you intended for harm, I used for good. What God used for good. That's key. God used the brothers' jealousy for their own brother as a chance to save them all. You just see that. All the bad things that happened to Joseph. And you see what it's become. Because it saved lives. Because of the famine. Because of what has happened. Joseph saw the change in his brothers that led to them coming to Egypt. And now this has all come back around so that it can save the Israelites, the people of God, for their history to continue from beyond the book of Genesis. That reassurance that Joseph gives his brothers also relates to Jesus' reassurance of Peter. Turn to John chapter 21, because there has to be, a happy ending almost to every story. So, as Joseph reassured his brothers, they would then be reassured by Joseph. So Peter would then be reassured by Jesus. In verse 15 it reads, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. I tell you the truth. When you were younger, you were dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you'll stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where do you not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death and by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." I love the ending to that because, again, the first words that Jesus said to Peter was, "Follow me." And he ends it with, "Follow me." To come back to Jesus. Jesus knew that Peter had disowned him 3 times. And Peter had the fear and just the sadness knowing that he had betrayed God and what he had done to Jesus. Because he clearly never wanted to do it. If we go back to Luke, he said, "I will never deny you," but yet he did it. Yet Jesus asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" To reassure him that 3 times you disowned me, I want to ask you 3 more times, "Do you love me?" And it ends the same way, "Follow me," as we are to be followers of Christ. So yes, my sermon title is about why do we let fear control us, but it also has a sub-point. To have the forgiveness that Joseph had for his brothers and that Jesus had for Peter. Because without those, we cannot completely begin to work. We have to forgive people. We have to remember that we can't let fear control us. And if we can't forgive people, we don't have a long way to go, because we have to do that before anything else. And I know it's hard, because I'm assuming with everything that I know it was hard for Joseph to forgive his brothers, no matter what. Because, yeah, he was second highest, because he put his brothers through trials. He put one of them in prison until he saw his youngest brother. He told them to bow, they bowed to him, and they made him like a god in their eyes. But yet, he forgave them, because he saw the change in them. He knew they had changed, because they said, one, because they had changed, but also because they knew that they had done wrong by Joseph. I'm going to finish my story about the combine as I wrap up. But I remember I was fearful. I was fearful for weeks about what was going to happen to me. And then enough time had passed where I had forgotten about it. And I just remember, I don't remember when, I just remember my dad walking into the house one day. He goes, "What happened to the glass on that combine?" I was like, froze. I was like, "What?" He goes, "Something happened to that combine window. It's broken." I was like, he's like, "Do you know who did it?" And I was like, I did it. And I was like, he's like, "What did you do?" I said, I didn't think my BB gun was powerful enough, so I shot the window. And he goes, "Obviously it was powerful enough." And nothing really came of it too bad besides don't shoot things that can break, that kind of thing. But the fact that I didn't get in a huge amount of trouble was like, it was more of a relief than anything. So then not long after, Dad sold the combine for scrap and Mom was happy. So you can, happy ending to that story. But as I leave you with this, you remember to forgive and don't let your fear control you. That we remember to be like Joseph, to be like Jesus, to remember and forgive. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you for this beautiful day, Lord, that we can be here together, that we can learn more about Joseph, Lord, and about Jesus, and what they meant to you. As we leave here, Lord, I pray that we remember that to forgive, and don't let our fear control us, that we learn to be more like you, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
If you would, stand and have the musicians come up. I don't like to end any service without an invitation, so we'll get an invitation. Thank you very much, Zachary. We'll continue to pray for you as God works with you and through you in your work with Him. But the rest of you, the last thing you mentioned, the big thing you mentioned there at the end was forgiveness. All of us need forgiveness. We've offended God, and we need Him to forgive us. He's made the way. He's asking you now. So if you would, turn to page
305.
305. We'll do a couple of verses. I decide to follow Jesus. If you need to come up and pray.